All right. Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to this PCUSA Church Growth Network webinar. My name is Josh Erickson, and I'm the moderator of the board for the network, and also one of your hosts and co-presenters today. We're going to get started in just a minute here, and what we're going to do is we're going to present Brian, Sarah, and myself to start, and then we will pivot to questions and answers and discussion later. And depending on how much time we have left at the end, we definitely want to do introductions if we have time of individuals, because one of the things we're really loving about this network is that we're finding friends across the denomination who are in similar contexts, and that's helping bridge the gap because your neighboring presbytery could be very different than yours, but who knew that there's a very similar one across the country, and we're trying to help bridge those gaps as well. So, all right, well let's get in here a little more detail. So today we are looking at this creative solutions for churches in transition, specifically identifying what that looks like for churches that are in leadership or pastoral transitions as well. And so I will ask my co-presenters to introduce themselves and a little bit about their context, and then we'll circle back to then the next steps. And so I'll ask our friend Sarah Bigwood to introduce herself.
Hi everyone. I just am just letting you know that I've got the background blurred out because I'm here in Corpus Christi. I normally hail out of Fargo, North Dakota, but decided to come and be here with my daughter for her spring break, and so I'm I'm calling from a hotel room. But I'm really excited to be on this call. My context is that I'm the head of staff at uh, First Presbyterian Church in Fargo, which is about a 500 member congregation, with a second site in Baker, Minnesota, which is about a 25 member congregation. And about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago now, we consolidated and kept two sites. So we're one church, two sites, and you'll get a chance to hear a little bit more about that later on. I am also the chair of the COM for our presbytery, which, if you jumped on the call early, you found out that that's a very large geographic area in North Dakota and part of northwestern Minnesota, primarily rural. I have probably the largest congregation, and the next largest congregation is probably around 300 members. So, uh, so I'm helping churches in a lot of different contexts, trying to figure out what to do next when if their pastor leaves. We also had 6 retirements last year in pastors. We now have about less than a dozen pastors serving actively in congregations here in our presbytery, and not all of them are full time. And we have 54 churches, so that gives you some idea of what kind of scale I'm dealing with here. So. That's it for me.
Awesome. Thanks, Sarah. And Brian.
Good morning. Good morning. Can everyone hear me?
Mhm.
Awesome. Serving in San Antonio. I'm the lead pastor of a church here in North Central San Antonio. I've been here 5 years, and we are currently supporting a church without a pastor who stepped down, and our staff, rather than become a traditional interim, with one person, there are four of us helping, and we are paid by that church to lead with very specific roles. So I am the pastor who preaches most Sundays. I preach over there, and then I drive over to our campus and preach 2 more times. Then we have our youth director who does all their tech. He's in their office once a week. And then we have a pastoral care support through Pastor Morrisan, a retired chaplain. She is on their campus occasionally, but does all of their pastoral care and oversees that. And we had one more pastor, but we're phasing down because that relationship will end April 30th. And the way I fell into that is I moderated their session immediately after their pastor stepped down, and I brought them the checklist of what happens next. A piece of paper that says, "Here's your steps," and they all went, "Oh my gosh, this pastor was here for 5 years, and it took us 3 years to get a pastor before, and we had a really rough interim." So on the spot, I just said, "Hey, would you want to try something different?" And I had no approval to do it, and went back to our staff and said, "Man, they're desperate. Can we help them?" And that's my context, and that relationship is ending. It's been about a year and a half. We have accelerated their process to start looking by about 2 years. So they're looking for a pastor now, but the presbytery thought it might be good for us to have some space between us and the next pastor. And we've been very, very aggressive. We have shrunk their session, reorganized their staff, remodeled their sanctuary, got them a new website, got them new staff. So we've done a lot, and that's my context. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. So my name, like I said before, is Josh Erickson, and I'm the senior pastor of Park Ridge Presbyterian Church. And as we were developing, which is in the Presbytery of Chicago in the suburbs up here near O'Hare, when we were developing this webinar, Sarah and Brian kindly said to me, Josh, you need to talk about your journey in this because it represents a third way for churches in pastoral transition. And I said, only if you're sure. No, I said for sure, I'd be happy to. But what I'm going to be sharing about is an adoption merger that took place between my church and the neighboring PCUSA congregation. And this was part of their journey. It was unexpected on our side. And I'll tell you more about that when I get to my presentation time. But it was a great opportunity for all of us. We were about 300 members, which does make us a substantively sized church at the time, and 25 people transferred over via an adoption merger. And I can share with you 5 years later, it was a true merger and very catalytic for all of us. And so very excited about that. Um, Brian, can you real quickly let Michelle know how many members in your two churches?
So our church, I would just say our attendance, because the membership is irrelevant. We keep ours real trimmed really down. They said when I got here it was 650 to 800 members, but there's no way. So we probably have 400 to 500 members. We have between 150 and 200 on Sunday morning between two services, and our budget's 850,000 to $1 million. So we have a wealthy church. The church that we are partnering with has a few hundred members, 300, I think is 250 is what they say. They're now averaging 60 to 75 in worship since we've been there.
Fantastic. All right. Well, let's get into it just a little bit further. We've done our introductions and moving forward as well. And what we're defining as churches in leadership transition, are churches that are experiencing a change in pastoral or certified ruling elder or CLP, depending on what you call it, leadership. And so this does dovetail to churches in other kinds of congregational transition, but we're not going to focus so much on those pieces today. Additionally, we want to clarify we are not going to be talking about calling a traditional interim, because if you're in a church or a context that can do that, that's fantastic. We are super excited about hiring CREs or stated supplies or CLPs, but if you have that in your toolkit, then that's fantastic also. But we know that's not an option for many churches as well. And then it is also appropriate at that given time to talk about consider closing a congregation. And we're not going to explore that today as well. That's a different conversation for a different time. But what we are going to look at is what we've already talked a little bit about. Option one, which is what Brian will talk about, is the shared staff. Option two is what we're affectionately now calling mainline multi-site, what Sarah has done in Fargo. And then what we did here in my church, an adoption merger. And I'll explain the contrast there, a little bit of the different kinds of mergers as well. And so we're going to start with Brian as our first presenter.
Thank you. Thank you. So just what my week looks like, just looking at what it looks like today. I start at the neighboring church in the morning and I preach. And then right after the sermon, we have a time of fellowship where the other team member picks up the worship. And during that time of fellowship, I walk out the door and drive over to the other campus and preach 2 more times at the main campus. I lead a staff meeting on Monday morning for them of mostly volunteers because they don't have much staff. And then I moderate their session. And the other staff members are there during the week, so they have a staff presence. And like I said, the youth director does all of their tech and any opportunities for youth, which they don't have, but we invite them to them. And then we have someone who does all of their pastoral care and oversees and develop their pastoral care team. So they were doing it, but they weren't doing it well because most of the members are older. The vast majority of their members are older, and it's a challenge for some things. We just recommended that they move their session meetings to Sunday afternoon because they can't drive at night. And so a lot of them don't come to the meetings anymore. So that's our context. What it looks like for them, aside from how we're there, they write a check once a month to our church for about 60% of what they would have paid a full-time interim. They are in the process of looking for a person, and their budget is like 75,000 max probably for a full-time with salary and housing with full benefits. They have a day school. I also lead the chapel on Wednesday morning for the children's day school, but they have no families that come from the day school to the church. It's a smallish day school. And so they write a check to us. We disperse that to staff, and we have a covenant that we operate by, which is we're not there to take over the church. So we don't meddle in their search process. And I am acting like an interim. So I'm not there to make friends. I'm there to do what an interim should do, which is identify problems, challenges, and get the keys ready to hand over to somebody else. And that's the phase we're in now. That's actually the name of it, handing over the keys. So we're preparing them for us to not be there. It's been fun. It has impacted the main campus. It's given us some challenges. Some people didn't like it. But there's also been some tremendous blessings in doing it. It's a part of our larger vision at the main campus to have a second campus or a second church somewhere else, but we have no intention for this to be a permanent relationship. So that's my context. What we learned is that you got to have the right mindset, and some of our members at the main campus do not. They just don't. Why are we doing this? What do we get out of it? How is this helping us? It looks like it's taking a lot of your time. The partnered church really likes it. It's been very beneficial to them. And they've been very complimentary and kind. And it's stimulated growth. Like they never had any new member classes. So we've added 15 or so new members in the last year. We saved the day school. They were going to close the day school. We kept it open and reinvigorated some of their leadership. So we've renovated their campus. They had several $100,000 in mold damage that needed to be done. So we did that. So I could tell you all the stuff we did, but I would say if you're thinking about this, what you need is one, a church that doesn't have a pastor who wants to try something different. So if they want a traditional interim, that's great. Like we said, we're not talking about that. You also have to have a church in the area that would like to help a church temporarily. And I don't know how you would find that, but that's what we're doing, just temporary supplied staff. You also have to have a committee on ministry and presbytery that supports it. And I'd say ours is 50-50. We are seen as an experiment. I had to create the contract that I abide by. I had to write it. I had to write my own contract for the rules that I would obey. And I had to sign an agreement with them that I was not trying to take over this church. And it was just kind of silly, but that's where we're at. So that's my time. And I hope that helps. Josh, is that enough, you think?
Let's answer Brent's question here. Is this above your hours at the primary church or part of the hours?
It's part of them, but I really work more. But I'm a workaholic. It's a problem. So I like doing it. And so I'm not trying to make that excuse. It's more time, but if I wasn't doing this, I would do something else. I was doing more things before that. I'm on presbytery on a commission for revitalization and new church development, and I'm on fiscal oversight. So I like to stay busy. But yes, excuse me, good grief, my allergies. It's part of my time, but I post my office hours on my door every week. It changes, and I put a little piece up on the door that shows my iCal, and at the bottom I say where I'm going to be and at what time. So people never ask me, what are you doing? Where are you working?
So, Brian, before we move on to Sarah, can you speak a little bit about the mindset shift you had to make and how you dealt with the resistance? And in your congregation. The presbytery side of this, I think I want to highlight for everybody is very contextual, right? So like it's just
Right.
going to vary, but just like for the local level of this, can you just speak a little more to that?
I would say that the mindset you have to have, first of all, is you got to remember you're not there permanently. So you can only take, you're trying. The advantage I had is I could do things quickly and I could just tell them it's okay if this is irritating, agree or disagree with what this is. Oh, we got a grant for a consultant to come in immediately. And he gave them a list of 20 things. And then if once they agreed to that list, I started powering through that list to get those things done. With our church, um, we candidly think that we're in a season where we're growing and there's just people we're looking for things to be upset about. So, we're talking about 5 to 6 people. So when they said, we don't like this is why we're leaving, I kind of was like, I mean, is that really true? We're helping a church, so you're going to leave? I mean, they never see me during the week except at programming. So how does it impact their lives? I've never turned down a meeting. I've never met with some of these people. So the thing we could have done is maybe done a better job preparing our members, but I don't know that that would have helped. We're not convinced. As the transition team would say, I don't think that would have made a difference. Anytime you do something that's new and good, it doesn't matter whether it's good or bad, you're going to lose some people. And so I've met with those people, but they wouldn't give me the reasons why they were leaving other than just, you know, we don't think you should do it. So does that make
Uh,
sense?
yeah,
Did I answer it,
yeah.
Josh?
No, that's good. That's helpful, I think. And then Courtney's asking, was that a growth consultant or a financial consultant?
No, growth.
Um,
Jim Gray. The Jim Gray Group is the name of him, and I've used him for years. I got him a grant. We've done 6 churches in this presbytery where he comes in over a weekend. He watches the worship service, then he meets with the elders, and then he spends another day with the elders, and then he writes a big report around 20 areas of church health, and he picks however many items that he wants to prioritize from those 20 and says, here's my recommendations. So Holy Trinity, the first thing he said was, your campus smells bad. Literally, it's in there. It smells like mold. And I can't believe you're not aware of it. They did test it, and there was about $150,000 worth of mold remediation to be done. He said, you need a new website. You need to, what was it? There was like 15 or 20 things, and we went through those. Some of the things they still don't want to do. I think they should have 6 elders for 50 to 75 people in worship. They don't need 9 people with 12 committees, but they've been slow to do that. So it's a specific church growth consultant is who we use to answer the question. Jim Gray.
awesome. All right, thanks, Brian. All right, let's pivot to our friend Sarah.
Yeah, so I arrived at the First Presbyterian Church of Fargo in about mid 2022, and I inherited a $200,000 budget deficit. It's a 500 member church, and I knew that the associate pastor was planning a retirement within 3 years. In the spring of 2023, I became the COM chair of Presbytery, and in late fall of that same year, discovered that there were 2 pastors in 2 of the other local churches that were going to be leaving within a year. One at the end of 2023 and one at the end of 2024. And all of these churches had limited budgets. Now, just for a little bit of context, I also exist in one of the fastest growing areas of the country. The Fargo-Moorhead area in the year 2000 had about 100,000 people, and it now is approaching 300,000. So in 20 years, we've had just this rapid growth, and it's all in young families, young professionals, people moving into the area, people either coming off the farm or even just moving here because there's just robust opportunities, and fairly decent quality of living. So we started talking together about the possibility of affording a pastor, but I knew that I did not want to yoke a church, that I had seen that in play in multiple different occasions. And what it always seemed to me like the churches that yoked were always kind of locked in some kind of battle for resources, a tug of war, if you will. Like, why are you spending more of your office hours at such and such a place? Or, I mean, that back and forth was something I did not want to do. I care about the church. I care about all churches. And to me, that seemed petty and just sort of a waste of time to try and explain myself that way. So I knew I didn't want to yoke. And at the same time, we had a elder who visited a church in Michigan for a funeral, and he spoke with their pastor, and they were discussing a possible merger, a lot like what I think Josh has done, and he'll explain his, and brought back the book, Mergers. I think it's Better Together, Making Church Mergers Work, which I read through and realized, oh, this is more along the line of what I would be willing to do. If we were going to have churches come together, this is what I would want. And so in about early 2024, I wrote up a proposal. It got approved by session, and we brought it to the congregation. And this is where we received significant pushback. Like Brian, there are just a lot of people who are in the larger church who, of course, because they have more resources and other things, just feel like they don't need to necessarily worry about their position. Although we had a $200,000 budget deficit that needed to be solved, which was going to get solved by eliminating staffing. But we got some immediate pushback. We had a lot of town hall meetings, but ultimately, one of the two mergers went through. We consolidated with one of the churches, Baker Downer, and the other church, we declined that. Between the two churches, we just really didn't feel like it was a good fit. And I think today, I really honestly believe that we made the right choice. So now we have one church, two sites. We have one session, and every church has a minimum of 3 elders for the first 50 people that are a part of their congregation. And for every 50 people above and beyond that, there's an additional elder on the session, so that it's representative sort of the size of the congregation, or what we call worshiping community. We share all staff in common, and we have different worship times. So the smaller church worships at 9 in the morning, and the larger church worships at 10:30 in the morning and on Sunday mornings. And some of the blessings that we have received from this consolidation is that there's been an increased sense of energy in both places. In the smaller church, in part because, as all of you are probably well aware, in smaller churches, everybody does everything. And right now they're just holding on by their fingernails, just getting all the stuff that has to be done. And when they came in, and all of a sudden all of a sudden they had a full staff at their disposal. They had support staff to deal with the finances. They had support staff to deal with the building and maintenance. They had program staff to help them with all of the various programs they wanted to engage. They no longer had to maintain all of that on their own. They had partners with that, and also people to just add things, and so their energy moved or shifted from having to maintain things to being able to dream. And that level of involvement from a small church then ignited a certain amount of energy at the large church, because the gift of the smaller church is that everybody knows they have to do something, right? I mean, generally speaking, I'm not going to say every church, but that is a gift of the small congregation, is that they're all invested and they're all involved. And so when they came to connect with the larger church, say on mission and other things, it was really kind of a wake-up call for the larger church that was used to just paying people to do things. So there's a lot of energy then renewed in the larger congregation or worshiping community as well. There were a lot of efficiencies. We reduced the number of meetings. We have one decision-making body. It means that we're all in it together. We have more money to spend on musicians than we ever had before. So the smaller church has live musicians every week. Sometimes they're different. We've just started up a bluegrass worship service at that site, which is really energizing some folks. The other benefit that we saw is that it got many people to start thinking outside of themselves. So this has shifted attention from just us, as a church or as a congregation, to us as worshiping communities, which is a great shift in mindset. And honestly, a lot of people have started to fall in love with each other across these worshiping communities. And we started to share services. We've started to share people. Just this last year, we elected someone to the elder as an elder for the larger worshiping community that was born and raised in the smaller worshiping community. It was just a better fit leadership wise. So we're starting to even share leaders, which is really kind of exciting. The small church now has a rental income because we were able to coordinate that because we of the staff support that we have. And the smaller church also, we managed to negotiate a long-term land use for a cell tower that was already there. They were already being paid for it. But this allowed us to take a very large chunk of money and invest it in an endowment, which the larger church already had the infrastructure set up for, and they are now receiving rental income that is double what they were getting yearly on the lease. So there's some benefits there. Very quickly, some of the challenges. At times, it can be hard to remember to speak on behalf of both um, communities. Because we are one community and we profess one community, we have to really be intentional about remembering that we are worshiping in two different locations. Like Brian, some people still don't get it. Their loyalties run deep with the church that they're in. As pastors, we're accustomed to loving all kinds of churches, all kinds of people in a lot of different locations. It can be hard for us to remember that some people love one church, and their pushback can be pretty significant at times. Sometimes there's issues with coordination, although we're getting so much better at that. And also, we had some transition issues with the staff. Some staff, like the support staff in our context, uh, really adopted this or adapted to this structure very quickly. They were in, they bought into it early. They supported both congregations. They had appropriate questions about it, but they supported it. Some of the program staff did not. And in fact, the vast majority of the program staff did not. We were in a position where our program staff was largely older and retiring within a year of when the consolidation took place. So we replaced them with staff, and we made it incredibly clear ahead of time that they serve both churches, and everyone who's now on staff is behind the consolidation 100%. They believe they serve both churches equally. So that was definitely one of the challenges that we had that I would be sure to be aware of in any future consolidation. Lessons learned, it takes a lot of leadership to operate this kind of system, even with a staff. If the one pastor needs to be only at one church, for example, on a Sunday morning, you need lay leaders to be preachers over at the other location, and vice versa. So you need to have a fair amount of lay leadership within this kind of system. And I'll have a chance to let's see, what else was another lesson that I learned? If I had to do it over again, I would get my session to actively approve the conversations I was having between the congregations in a different kind of way. They all knew about the conversations I was having. I was reporting back to them on all the conversations. We were moving forward with the conversations. But there's a point at which I would have liked to have had session actively say, you are going on behalf of us to these conversations. Or I would have had, we had multiple elders in these conversations at the same time, but I would have the entire session on board to begin with, to be able to say we're having this conversation on behalf of the session because the session wants to have this conversation. It's just a different level of approval from session that I would definitely make clear next time. I would have any town halls. We had a lot of town hall forums where we talked about what the consolidation would look like and how. I would have those run by elders, not by the pastor ever again. I would want it to be very clear that this was coming from session. And much like what Brian said earlier, you can't fix animosity. There are going to be people in your congregation who are upset by any kind of big decision that you make to help other people. And sometimes you just have to let that go. Also, what we discovered was that there was quite a significant animosity between one of the church, between the large congregation and one of the other potential consolidated churches. And there was just too much to overcome. And so letting that go and saying, I guess this just isn't going to be a good fit was probably the best decision that we made in all of that. Real quick, current goals as an executive team for the large church, I'm looking at making an executive team for the large church so that they function an awful lot like what how the smaller church functions on the session, which is to bring all of the concerns of the smaller church through one committee, one executive team. I'm looking to do that at the larger church. And the number one thing that I think I've gained from all of this is that I have so much energy, and like Brian, I'm a bit of a workaholic, that this works for me, this arrangement, because if I just focused on one church, I would wear them out.
Go ahead.
So being able to focus on two different churches, on multiple different worshiping communities, that works for me.
I mean, it's up to you. I don't think. I mean,
Are we getting some?
I got it. I think we're good.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks,
That's
Sarah.
it,
Yeah.
Josh.
Yep. I think I've Paul Moore. I got you, buddy. Awesome. Sarah, thanks. So before we move on to the next one, and anybody have any specific questions for Sarah? All right. Just wanted to check in. Okay. Hearing none, seeing none, we'll move on. Thanks, Sarah. Oh, go ahead. Anything you want to add?
Just a question. So
Oh, yeah.
what, when you sort of merged all of your budgets and things, how was, I don't know, what was the process like for that? Because I'm just curious, because it feels like so many conversations about yoking and things are about like, oh, well, this church is going to pay 30% and this church is going to pay 70% or this, that, or the other. So I'm just curious what that process was for actually like thinking about budgeting in a unified
Yeah,
way.
that's a great question because I think in our case, because the larger church has so many resources, we considered the smaller location as just a line item in both income and expense. So that's how we keep it separate for now, just to watch what happens. And most of the efficiencies that are realized on the smaller church's end. So we're sharing a lot of support staff and a lot of pastoral staff and program staff across, and they're not having to pay for it, but their budget didn't change much. Now, in the grand scheme of things, we went from a total of 7% of our budget was going towards, of the total budget, including the two churches, 7% was going to mission before the merger. Nearly 10 is going to mission now. That's how the efficiencies that we realize in the system are now allowing that smaller church to spend that much more in mission giving, which their hearts are at that. So that's how we've realized it. Also, they have now, we can afford to pay musicians. We can afford, so we just don't consider that they pay for the pastor at all. We don't consider that they pay for the staff at all. With the exception of one musician, which they share with us, that's it. Otherwise, their kind of budget is freed up then to do mission and other things. Does that answer your question, Courtney?
Yeah, thank you.
Mhm.
Awesome. Jen is asking what church and presbytery again? Sarah?
I'm at First Presbyterian Church in Fargo, North Dakota, with a site in Baker, Minnesota, as well, a second site. And we're in the Presbytery of the Northern Plains. And we had a really great relationship with the Presbyterian COM during that process, considering the fact that I was also chair during that whole time. When you said, who was it that said something about it's all volunteer based at their presbytery? Yeah, it's all volunteer based at ours too.
Awesome. And Brent's asking, on the Presbyterian level, do you count as two congregations?
No, we actually forced, well, not forced, but one of the parts of the agreement was that the Baker Downer Church officially closed. They left the Presbyterian Church. They we no longer have them listed separately as per capita, and they join anyone who wanted to could just join First Presbyterian Church of Fargo. We do a doing business as so they could keep their name. They still are Baker Downer Presbyterian Church. So they kept their names so that checks could be written out to the same church that people have always written checks out to, and they appreciated that. But one budget, one place where all that money is processed. And also, it just kind of says Baker Downer Presbyterian Church, a ministry of First Presbyterian Church of Fargo, um, in small print. So that's just how we consider it.
Great. And then I got a question for you. Um, okay, so I hope I get your name right. Morson's asking, can you explain the church growth again? How many you had and how many are there now since you began? I think both churches and then how you see those intersect would be great.
Right. So we started when I first arrived, we had, it's right out of COVID. Nobody eliminated anyone from any roles or anything like that. So we did a major adjustment. I would say that when I started, we had about 500 people on the rolls at the larger worshiping community. We had 40 on the rolls at the smaller worshiping community. When we consolidated, by the time we consolidated, 24 of those 40 members of the smaller congregation moved their membership. And we made it a very easy opt-in. But we didn't want to just assume everyone because at some level we knew that the roles were probably inflated. So people, anytime someone requests that has had a history with the Baker Downer Church, wants to be a part of the church again, we just automatically vote them in. So, and then I think this last recording of the Acts, we had 538 members, and we're about to add 8 more next month.
Awesome. Thanks. All right. Great. Any other questions for Sarah? I just want to make sure we grab them while they're fresh.
I want to say one thing about the growth. Our smaller congregation is now in a position far more ready to have growth conversations. And so we have started preparing. We've invited in a growth consultant. We're working on plans for how we're going to reach out in the local community this spring and summer. They're already at that place. The larger church is still recovering from fixing the $200,000 budget deficit. They're not quite there yet.
Oh, that's a great I think that's really helpful to hear. That as much this has been as beneficial for the smaller congregation, faster than it is for the bigger.
Mhm. Yep.
So and I think that's a Big C church win right there. Awesome. All right, thank you so much, Sarah. All right. Well, I'll share about my merger experience and how this connects in. The book that Sarah alluded to is Better Together: Making Church Mergers Work, and I put that link in the chat. And that's a very vital resource in this conversation. So I'll tell you the story real quickly is in October of 2020 when the world was still on pause. I got a call from the elder named Jim Oates, who was an elder at Niles Community Church, which is the neighboring Presbyterian church to mine. And neighboring, I mean Niles and Park Ridge are adjacent suburbs, share school districts, and sometimes you don't know when you move to one to the other. And they called us to say, would you be interested in a merger exploration conversation? And I said, I think the answer is yes, but let me bring it to the session. And so I did that, and they said, of course, we would like to explore this. And I said, great. And so we were referred to that book, and we ordered copies and started reading it, all the relevant people. And then we appointed a merger exploration team. It was 3 members from the Niles Church, 3 members from my church, and myself. One of the things that was a little complicated is at that time, they had an interim who was finishing up their time, and then they moved to Pulpit Supply with an appointed moderator. In the midst of this, we consulted with the Presbyterian COM, and they assigned a collaborative administrative commission to come alongside us. And it was basically so we could get real-time feedback from 3 other members of the presbytery, so that we could get just sort of some impulses and some check-ins without having to go back to COM on their schedule as well. And that was very vital because they didn't have a pastor, and so we were worried about some parity and all this as well. Well, what we did is we figured out quickly that it was going to be a merger was plausible, and then a merger became probable, and then the merger did take place. But what we discovered along the way was that it needed to be what is an adoption merger, meaning that the Niles Community Church would merge into Park Ridge Presbyterian Church, and then they would become part of a new church together. However, in this particular type of merger, we retained the name and the location, and that was stipulated in the merger agreement that we put together. It was a very serious document. So we worked this all through, and we worked through the storming and norming and developing, and then we had a sense that not everybody at their church was going to vote for it, but that was okay, and that's one of the rules of mergers is you're not going to keep everybody, and you just got to be okay with that going in. And then in the summer of 2021, the Niles Community Church voted in favor of the adoption merger, which stipulated that they would sell the building. The presbytery would sell the building. I'll talk about that in a second. And ecclesially, they would transfer their members over to our church. They would choose to. And then ultimately, we would close the congregation as an entity and a church and a corporation for all the reasons why you want to do that. So there's no hanging issues related to that. And my church, the lead church, as you call it, voted unanimously to welcome this merger and to provide a new chapter for all of us. And it was very exciting. I will add that also at the same congregational meeting for my church, we voted to become an open and affirming congregation as well. And so we just like doing big things all at once. And I have the gray hair to prove it as well. And I mentioned that because it coincided with other ministry that was still happening as well in all of this along the way too. So we set out for the merger. They had their final worship service. They had a celebration there. Then we had a celebration merger Sunday with a brunch and all those good things that Presbyterians do. And then we moved forward. Polity-wise, what happened was we kept a remnant session intact for the joining church so that there were people that could officially be a part of helping work those things through. And that's important from a process standpoint as well. And then when the time came and everything was closed, then the presbytery dissolved the congregation and they moved forward. We moved forward as one church. On a practical level, my church, the new church, as it would be, retained the records. So we have those. The presbytery doesn't have those because if someone needs to dig through records, it would be us as the merged church, right? Because if we need to look up a baptism or a wedding, the presbytery is not going to, necessarily. They do it, of course, but it's not. That is the example of why this was a real merger too. It's been just a tremendous gift, as alluded to. One of the things that it did was it freed up these 25 out of roughly 30 people that did transfer over to serve in their areas of passion and expertise and interest. It brought renewed vitality to our facilities, to our missions, to our women's ministry, which is PW here, and they're still thriving in our church, and additionally into our music ministry. And that was one of the big things that was really important about this merger was that um, the innovation that they had attempted at the former church was in the area of music. And they had a band of contemporary worship band that was functional and vibrant. They were stuck in a little bit of a time warp with their music selections, and they found out about that, 10 or 20 years. But they had innovated in there, and that was a growing edge for us. We were trying to diversify our music through adding contemporary worship into our mix as well. And so we brought them over, and that ended up being a catalyst not only for the people that wanted to stay leading that music, but we had a few people on the edges around us that were like, I'm not going to do this if I'm the only one. And all of a sudden, overnight, we had a band of 7 to 10 people rotating through that kind of came alive. And there's a whole nother conversation about all that, but it really wasn't a place where we saw a tremendous ad. Fast forward 5 years later, things have going through tremendously in all this, and currently our clerk of session, the president of the trustees, and the chair of our capital campaign are all transfers from the merger. And so when you think about like how did this really go, it really happened, and it was catalytic for all of us. Um, Two more things, and then I'll wrap it up here and see if there's any questions. Is one of the things that ended up happening in this is because it was an adoption merger of a church that was on life support, as we would say. We ended up with a funds agreement distribution with the presbytery. And this is one of the places where the AC was really helpful, where 60% of the net profits from selling the building would come to the lead church as a part of the merger. 20% was given as a legacy gift to some mission partners of the closing church. And then 20% went to the presbytery. We thought that was an appropriate split based on the circumstances that if they didn't merge with us, they would have become functionally a defunct congregation. And the COM was aware of this. And so more than that just didn't seem right. There are other times where it should be higher percentages or different based on how it goes together as well. A little bit of that was recognizing the that not everybody was going to transfer over as well. And so
Mhm.
just trying to make sure we had a just distribution there. The other thing that then we did was, and I'll share a quick picture to show you, is we did a legacy wall in our church where we kept some of the beautiful stained glass that one of their church members had made. And this is in the side hallway of our sanctuary. And this is the life of Christ. Funny story, I was in their sanctuary and I said, "Hey, did you notice that that's the life of Christ?" And in typical Presbyterian fashion, they were like, "Oh, we didn't notice that." And so, but I selected these. It's a longer story, and we installed it in there. And it's the legacy wall that is both beautiful, but also really does help us maintain their legacy. Uh,
Mhm.
and their kids, their grandkids, their friends, when they come to worship, and they do bring some people with them at times, they always go show them that, and they think it's really a special thing going on there.
Mhm. Josh, Courtney has a question.
Yeah,
How long was the process from starting conversation until official merger Sunday?
about a year. Um, and that's one of the mistakes that we make is in mergers is that we stay in the process too long and when we know it's not going to work. And that's one of the values that the Better Together Making Church Mergers work brings is that it gives a sense of metrics that can help determine the lead church and the joining church. It outlines a merger profile. It delineates about how you kind of have conversations around staff transitions and make sure that's part of the agreement as well. And that was another thing that was much more simple about this is relative to that is my church was clearly the lead church, hands down. There wasn't any debate about that. And then also they didn't have a pastor, so there wasn't that issue. And then also they only had two staff people because they had an admin who was part-time and a contract piano player, and we gave them severance packages as a part of the transition as well. And I want to just highlight that the buildings are 7 minutes from each other, and shared a school district. And so very, very common context. And just if you're paying attention, so my story includes two churches that were 7 minutes from each other.
Yep.
Brian's story includes churches that are 15 minutes from each other. And Sarah's includes churches that are 25, 30 minutes from each other. And there's something to be said about that relative to what kind of options really work for people in these circumstances. All right. Well, that is the what we wanted to share as the whole group. And at this point, we want to open it up to conversations that anybody might have or follow-up questions for anyone here. And I do want to make sure, I want to anticipate one thing is, Sarah, could you speak a little bit about how you see your experience helping with the even further rural churches in your presbytery? Because I know we've got Stephen with us, who's in a frontier area of Eastern Oregon, and I'm wondering how that might help in those places where population
So
is even further farther between. Yeah.
I'm not sure because in our context, we're looking ahead 10, 20 years, and we know that the church we've already consolidated with in Baker is in the direct line of growth. It will be a suburb in 20 years. Of the metropolitan area. The other church that we are beginning a conversation with that's in the opposite direction by about 30 minutes from the church as well is also in the line of growth, and in 20 years will be a suburb of the metropolitan area. So I'm not so sure that we're dealing specifically with, I mean, rural, yes, probably compared to say where you are, but I wouldn't call them that rural, at least not with the outlook. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Just it. And Stephen and I have had personal conversations. That's something the Growth Network is trying to help figure out a little bit is how do we have a conversation around growth that really is able to take into consideration urban and suburban and rural and frontier. And then also within those are distinctions between the health and vibrancy of the communities
Yep.
that are in those areas.
I
So
can from the perspective of COM talk about a frontier style situation that's taking place elsewhere in our presbytery if you're interested.
yeah, that'd be great.
So one of the things that the conversations that I had just this last week was with a pastor who is a Methodist pastor serving two of our Presbyterian churches that are about a half an hour away from each other. And also an ELCA church that's north of them by about a half an hour. And one of the conversations was one of our Presbyterian churches is down to 5 members. The ELCA church has a potential to grow. Our Park River Church, or one of our other PCUSA churches, is growing because of this pastor's effort and because of the congregation's spirit. And so the conversation I had was directly with that pastor saying, how much time do you really want to be putting into this small church with 5 members that isn't going to grow? And how much can we send you to this other church where you're only there once a month? Instead, you could be there every week, right? Even though it's not a Presbyterian church, it's an ELCA church. The point is, how do we grow the kingdom? And where are we willing to put our resources? And so the conversation has to be with my Presbyterian church. I have to go have this conversation with, are you even viable? And what's the best use of this pastor's time?
Great. We've got a question here. from MB. One is, are there any examples of churches that were once one church in two locations shifting to two churches? Uh, oh, so okay, yes. If there's so what we would you would say is there a multi-site that then that the second location started as a satellite and then became an independent congregation?
And then is there any example of that happening and then them deciding at a future date to return to one church in two locations? Or is that a future? Because I feel like we're on the edge of that possibility here. So that's why I'm just curious.
I don't know of many of that in the mainline context, because that development takes, a long time to progress. That would be a question that I think some of the multi-site consultants might know of.
Okay.
In the mainline context, not many. I know of here in Chicagoland, we have Willow Creek, which is a mega
Right.
church, and they have spun off independent congregations. Most of that came in the aftermath of their pastoral struggles.
Right.
But hey, we're all prone to problems. And then the other question you had was, are there examples of rural, open and affirming congregations becoming a satellite congregation of an urban downtown congregation? And yeah, and that's Sarah's story.
Sarah's.
That's my
Oh, okay.
context.
I
Yep.
was late, so I will reach out to you, or
Yeah.
I'll watch the whole thing again when
And
it comes
Josh, I
back
just want to
out.
jump in and just because I've told you all, I think Sarah's model is the one that I think most people should consider. Some of the challenges with doing what we did is you've got to have two sessions. And I hope you heard her say it a couple times, having one session is much more advantageous than having two. And we did get a lot of energy from this. There's no question. But Pastor Morsan, who's part of our team, is actually listening. And I have been texting her, does she want to say anything? And she just would want people to know that there were a lot of benefits to the main church doing this, even with us a little bit of pushback. I would say that what I look for in the future is multi-site. I think it's efficient. If you're in an area where you can't afford a pastor, when you combine resources, you heard Sarah say a couple times, all of a sudden there's all these efficiencies. Because they don't have to pay a pastor at one of the campuses, you can use all those resources for musicians, for everybody. And I can see it in the relationship I have now. But unfortunately, in a church like the one I'm talking to, they would have to get much smaller before they really saw the wisdom in considering being a multi-site relationship. So my challenge to you is to think too, can you be like Sarah and look into the future and see some of these churches that are sliding? Because when they get down to 5 or 10, what's the point of talking about it? It's no longer viable as a multi-site. Food for thought, but I'm a fan of the multi-site model with one session.
Awesome. All right. Well, we're at time. And so I think I know I have a few minutes if people have other questions. But thank you for joining us. One thing I just want to highlight is in our Presbyterian polity and values and theology, it is much easier if the smaller congregation approaches the larger congregation. And so this is where, as Presbytery leaders, or if you are in the smaller church, then approaching the larger church, the neighboring church, does help out in a lot of ways. Um,
And Josh, just
yeah,
as a follow-up on that point too, for anyone who represents presbyteries, there is a dramatic difference between presbyteries that are willing to work with churches through creative solutions and those that are not. And honestly, I mean, Brian can speak to that just as well as anyone. But the reality is that if the presbytery isn't behind it, creative solutions, then it's just going to be an uphill battle.
yeah. All right, thank you. Well, hey, just want to plug, we've got a one-day seminar coming up, workshop in Champaign, Illinois. So if you're in the Midwest or the Senator Lincoln Trails or near there, it's going to be a one-day thing that we're doing on Tuesday, April 21st. $25 basically covers your food for the day for lunch and things. And we're excited about that. And then also coming soon will be a save the date for our 2026 conference, which will be October 5th through the 7th in Cincinnati, Ohio. It's going to start with a Monday night gathering and then be 2 days on that Tuesday and Wednesday. And so we're super excited about that. Well, obviously, you heard about the network somehow. You're either in the group or one of the other Facebook groups or hearing about it. So you're all connected. But if you're not getting our emails, please be in touch so we can make sure you get those. Do check your spam. We did hear today that, of course, some of these emails don't get going as through everybody's filters. And then last but not least, one more question. Aside from the one book, are there any resources you would recommend, especially from the perspective of being a larger, better resourced church? Courtney, we're gonna have to ponder that, and that's a great example of a good post for the Facebook group. That's the kind of thing that gets a lot of traction, and we can work on that all together.
Sounds good. Thank
All
you.
right, thanks, friends, and we will see you next time.